start the meeting this evening, I just want to run through a few basic things so that the meeting runs smoothly. So first of all, I should say who's on this committee, and it's a committee of 5 councillors, 4 of whom are with us this evening. They're Councillor Rout, Councillor Reddish, Councillor Heeson and myself. Unfortunately, Councillor Jones has been called away on pressing business this evening, so can't be with us, but I have little doubt that he will watch the recording of this afterwards. That is a balanced group of councillors, 2 Conservative, 2 Labour, 1 Liberal. But tonight, these councillors, and including myself, are not there as representatives of their party. This is very much the idea of the Parliamentary Select Committee. We are here to listen to people, to take evidence from people, and then at the end of this entire process, formulate recommendations on a cross-party basis. So it's not a party political issue at all. If people who are in the waiting room feel that listening to this, they wish to contribute to that process, please feel free to make a comment on the Facebook page that is dealing with this. Equally, if you write to the WALLEY'S Quarry Task and Finish Group, care of Castle House, Newcastle, your evidence will be taken into account. I already am aware that there are some quite detailed comments on the Facebook page, and can I assure you that those too will be taken into account by this group as they formulate their response to this issue. Beyond that, what I'll say is about the procedure this evening. I'll ask all members of the committee to mute themselves unless they wish to speak, and indeed indicate that by using the raise hand facility so that we don't have people crossing one another. Each group or individual who is speaking this evening will have 10 minutes to speak. They will be timed by council official, and a verbal warning will be given after 8 minutes have elapsed so that no crucial points are missed. There'll be a time, if you like, to wind up. After that, there will be 5 minutes maximum of questions from members of the committee to the person or persons making representation this evening. What I would urge both sides in that process is please keep those questions pithy. What we don't want is an extra speech at that point. We want to try and gather as much information as we can. So it will be presentations of up to 10 minutes. Obviously, there is no compulsion to take the 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes of questions. I'm also aware that quite a few of these groups have already made written representations to the committee. And again, I would urge those not to be gone over in detail. They're all there. Again, they've been circulated to all committee members and they've been read. So that information is already banked, so to speak. So on those terms, before we listen to our speakers as such, I'm going to invite Mr. Andrew Bird, who is the head of the recycling service of the council, just to take us through the background to all of this. So if I hand over now to Mr. Bird, and he can speak to us for the first session.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Okay, that's wonderful. We've got a couple of plans that we will put up, so I'll be asking Darren Walters if he can potentially share those so people can see them on the screen. Okay, so in terms of the background, WALLEY'S Quarry landfill, as we know, is located off Cemetery Road in Silverdale and is sited in the Thistleby ward. The landfill is located on the site of a former clay extraction quarry. And we do have a plan that shows the wards, and I think that will come up shortly. The landfill itself has been in operation since 2007 and has planning permission for the tipping of non-hazardous waste until 2026. Thank you, Darren. Followed by the tipping of inert materials for restoration purposes, and this has to be, this is in place up to 2042. The current landfilling operations are giving obviously rise for concern to the local community about impacts on health and well-being and the environment issues in the surrounding communities. These concerns cover the following matters: nuisance from gull activity and the number of gulls, odours impacting on the community and their homes, workplaces and outdoor environment, highway safety concerns relating to waste vehicles accessing the site, and material falling from vehicles. And lastly, concerns about the impact of emissions on land, air and water. Okay, just turning towards the regulation side. So just for noting that all modern landfills are principally regulated by way of planning permissions and environmental permits. In terms of the environmental permits, I'll deal with that first. The landfill is currently operated by Red Industries RM Limited, Red, and is regulated through the environmental permits. Permit reference is EPR/DP 3734DC, and another one EPR/EB 398ML, and those are issued by the Environment Agency to the operator, in this case Red Industries. The environmental permits are issued and regulated under the auspice of the Environmental Permitting England and Wales Regulations 2016, and permit conditions designed to ensure that the site operates in accordance with the European Community Directive of 1999/31/EC on the landfill of waste, commonly known as the Landfill Directive. Permits are only issued to landfill operators who are considered by the EA to be financially and technically competent. Operators are required to provide a range of technical information at the application stage, which details how the site is to be operated and the controls in place to minimise harm to the environment and human health. The technical information will cover assessment of the local community of emissions to air, odour, noise and dust control, and landfill gas generation. There will also be extensive details submitted regarding the day-to-day management of the site to minimise the impact on the community and the environment. The Environment Agency are required to make a range of information relating to the permit publicly available. This includes the application documents, the technical reports, any monitoring data, and obviously statutory returns, and by that I mean tonnage inputs and the like. Permit compliance assessment reports, correspondence between the EA and the operator concerning the permit, and details of any enforcement action. So all of those items are and should be made publicly available. In terms of landfills, modern landfills are designed to contain waste in engineered cells with appropriate infrastructure to control leachate, which is effectively the water when it rains and it permeates through the waste. It becomes known as a substance called leachate. Gas created through the degradation of waste. Any landfill operator is required to exercise best available techniques, BAT as it's known, in the operation and management of the landfill, with compliance and enforcement of a number of permit conditions, such as odour. And again, these are linked to the BAT exercise. The permit reference that I alluded to earlier allows the site to receive up to 250,000 tonnes of waste per annum, of non-hazardous waste, I should say, falling within specific categories detailed within the permit. The Environment Agency temporarily allowed an increase of waste inputs up to 400,000 tonnes in 2019 only. There is currently a decision pending on a permit variation application made by RED to permanently increase waste inputs up to the 400,000 tonnes per annum that they were allowed to take in during 2019. And we anticipate the EA will shortly publicly consult on its draft permit decision prior to making its final determination on the variation of the application. I'll move on now to planning permissions, and Darren, if I could ask you to firstly just show the photograph of the site, and then yeah, that's wonderful, thank you. So we can see there where the site sits in terms of the topography of the surrounding area. So planning permission for the landfill was granted in 1997 by the Secretary of State for the Environment. The terms of the planning permission are regulated by Staffordshire County Council as the Waste Planning Authority. The site is required through the planning permission to be fully restored by 2042 in accordance with the details previously approved by Staffordshire County Council. The planning permission also places restrictions on the operational hours and number and routing of HGV vehicles and movements into and from the site. Post-closure, and Darren, if we could just show the contour plan. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. So post-closure, the site, and you can see that that's the contour plan that shows what the site will look like when it's completed. Effectively, you can see a dome there. So post-closure, the site will continue to be the legal responsibility of the current operators, RED, with ongoing duties under the environmental permit until such time as the EA formally accept surrender of that environmental permit. As a landfill is located on the site of a former quarry, there is a legal requirement to undertake periodic reviews of the minerals planning permission every 15 years. This will happen until the site is fully restored. And this ensures that the planning conditions are kept absolutely up to date and reflect any changes in local circumstances and national legislation and best practice. I'm now just going to move on to the health impacts. So the Borough Council has sought advice from Public Health England, PHE, concerning the health effects of the site. PHE have advised the following as of December 2019, and I'll quote what they've said. PHE has not been presented with any environmental data relating to the pollutant levels post-February 2018. Neither has PHE received any analysis regarding site-related odour complaints related to either local meteorological conditions or site practices. With respect to gull activity associated with the site, we would not anticipate that this should pose an issue on a well-run and maintained site and should be controlled by the adherence to the environmental permitting conditions. PHE have assessed the environmental data provided by the EA, and this was in between July 2017 to February 2018, and note that these levels are low and would not expect there to be any long-term health consequences. However, odour can be a cause of stress and anxiety, even when the substances causing the odours are not necessarily harmful to health at levels dictated by these locations. If residents have health concerns, they are advised to contact their local GP, who in turn can seek advice from PHE. From the analysis of the syndromatic surveillance data for the period up to February 2018, PHE has no evidence at this stage of an increase in GP consultations or calls to NHS 111 by the neighbouring population for the symptoms of breathing difficulties or eye problems. We are in the process of obtaining an update for the subsequent period. PHE does not normally comment on individual research studies, instead reaching the view that on the weight of new and existing evidence. With respect to landfills, PHE's position is that living close to a well-managed landfill site does not pose a significant risk to human health. PHE is continuing to review the evidence base and work on this is ongoing. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my background briefing.
Okay, I'd like to thank Mr. Bird very much for putting us in the picture. That really is a briefing simply for background, so I don't propose to invite questions to Mr. Bird. It was simply there as for information. So what I'm going to do now is pass to our first speaker this evening, which is Councillor Simon Tagg, who is the chairman of the Liaison Committee in this matter, and is also the local county councillor. Before I invite him to speak, I should remind all speakers that this, of course, is a recorded and also live streamed meeting this evening. There is no such thing, of course, as parliamentary immunity for anyone outside the House of Commons. So I would urge people to be temperate in how they express themselves and careful in making remarks which are not insulting and indeed are verifiable. So with that caveat, I invite Councillor Tagg to address us for 10 minutes. And again, after 8 of those minutes, if necessary, a warning will be given to him. Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to give evidence to the Working Party tonight and to talk about the unique position that the Liaison Committee has, and also the relating to the landfill, and also the limitations it also has as well. A bit of background about the Liaison Committee. It was formed around 2007 following the start of the operations of the landfill at WALLEY'S Quarry. It has been historically chaired by the local county councillor, and I've chaired it since 2009. Its remit is set down in a legal condition of the planning application for the site, which obliges the operator, currently Red Industries, to arrange and service the meetings, provide a venue, and assure that the minutes and agendas and minutes are published from the meetings. And to hold the meetings at least quarterly, but no less than twice a year. And the condition stipulates, Chair, that the meetings are not to be held in public, although in the past the public have been allowed to attend with the permission and agreement of the operator. The purpose of the Liaison Committee, as again set out in the legal planning obligation, is to provide a forum for the exchange of information and a method of communication with the local community via local representatives. The Liaison Committee can make recommendations to the operator and to the Environment Agency, and has done so in the past, but has no executive powers to act or to request records of information that the operator may deem to be commercially confidential. Who attends the meeting? Again, the attendance is stipulated quite sharply in the planning condition and includes representatives from the operator, the 2 local county councillors and the 4 local borough councillors for the area affected by the landfill, local parish councils, residents groups, and up to 3 local residents appointed at the discretion of the operator. In fact, most of all the people who are on the invite list tonight and attending this meeting are either members of the Liaison Committee or have been invited to attend in the past. Also allowed to attend are the relevant officers from the County Council and Newcastle Borough Council, for example, in relation to planning and also environmental health. And there's also importantly a representative of the Environment Agency. The agendas and minutes for each of the committee meetings are published on the operator's public website, and the meetings involve a detailed update from the operator, updates from the Environment Agency and the Borough Council's Environmental Health and Staffordshire County Council's Planning. There's also a forum for attendees on behalf of the community, such as the councillors, parish councils, etc., to ask questions of the operator and the EA. Just moving on to some recent recommendations of the Liaison Committee. Many people will recall the major issues of odour in the area, particularly on the years 2013 and 2015, which led to action being taken by the previous operator on the site. That included changes to site layouts, odour masking measures, and latterly a large cash investment in a leachate treatment plant on site. Now, as Andrew Bird, the officer, has pointed out what the leachate is, I won't go into that again, but previously it was being stored on the site and then transported off site, which led to a lot of odours. And really for a couple of years or so, the odour problems, I believe, subsided considerably, particularly for the surrounding area and particularly for farther afield in the borough. The odour will never go away, it's a landfill, but when it becomes a irritant and a problem, that is when we get reports. Following the recent upsurge in odours during 2018, Liaison Committee members pressed for air quality sensors to be installed and challenged the EA over where they were positioned so they would get the best effect for picking up any odours. Also, the Liaison Committee has encouraged the operator to engage with residents in the area, which has led to newsletters being published and delivered to households with details on how to complain about odours in the local area. Since the lockdown, there hasn't been any meetings of the Liaison Committee. April's meeting was cancelled because of the start of the lockdown. A request has been submitted on 2 occasions since for a virtual meeting to be set up, but no response has been received from the operator to date. The next meeting is due in September. Because of the clear constraints of the planning application on the Liaison Committee, it's often seen as a talking shop. And given that it's not allowed to be, obviously, members of the public to attend or to be webcast, for example, the accusation is that things are being kept secret when they're not. I know the members of the committee can report that there is often heated debate, robust challenge, particularly of the Environment Agency, who ultimately have the powers to investigate and take action against this. As well as Andrew Bird pointed out, there are many issues other than odour. One of the issues that I'm particularly engaged upon with being the local county councillor is the many highways issues associated with the site, particularly the entrance to the landfill in Cemetery Road. And this has been looked into by the county council, and both myself and Councillor Jones, who's the other county councillor for the Cemetery Road area and affected by the traffic issues, have pledged to use some of our small local highway budget to seek to address the road safety issues caused by lorry movements and also parking up. My final point really to the Scrutiny Committee is to emphasise the role of the Environment Agency to investigate odour issues and to take action if necessary. And I believe you will be speaking to the Environment Agency, so you will probe them fully on their role and the actions that they have taken. But that's all I've got to say at the moment, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tagg. So we now have a period of questions. If any member of the committee wishes to ask a question of the council, if they could please indicate.
I think I'm up to speed with the report, Simon Tagg. So I'm quite happy with what you've said, and I've made lots of notes on yours and the previous speaker. So thank you, but no question.
Do you have any other members of the committee who wish to ask a question of Councillor Tagg? I'm taking silence to mean that, again, I've taken notes on this, but there are no further questions. So I'd like to thank Councillor Tagg for his contribution, and we can perhaps move on to our next representation this evening, which I believe is from the Thistlebury Residents Association, and I believe it will be 2 individuals. This is what I have anyway before me, Dr. Drakakis Smith and Mr. Barnett. So again, if we can introduce those into the room, and they will address the committee on the same terms, so a maximum of 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've already made a written submission, so we won't repeat that in detail. But what we would like to say is that we have supported the acceleration of the amount of waste that is going into the site, so that the site will be filled quicker, and this will reduce, hopefully, the nuisance. However, we've attached caveats to that, in that it will need extra monitoring, more careful monitoring, and it will probably need some cooperation from the police with regards to traffic control along Cemetery Road, etc. Secondly, we might suggest to you that given the closeness of houses, that the type of waste, now that the waste has reached the surface level, would be changed so that it is less noxious. The waste going in at the moment is putrescent, and that is causing the leak and the gas. Now, the waste has reached the surface, so maybe there needs to be a change of the type of waste going into the void. We would also recommend that there is no more building of houses close to the site. We understand that recent permission has been given for more than 100 houses to be built less than 50 metres to the infill site. This is much too close. And also across the road from Cemetery Road, there was another 35 mooted and passed. And we know that there are big plans for the golf course further up the hill. So we would say until this site is capped, there should be no more housing development as close as this, because it is this proximity where odour is inescapable, if you like. It's too close. We think there should also be a faster response time by the Environment Agency, because at the moment we were told it takes 48 hours, or it did take 48 hours for a complaint, a telephone complaint, to reach an officer who would go out and investigate. Now, we all know that these odour events are can be quite short-lived, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. When they've been really bad, they've lasted for several hours. But we haven't felt that the EA has been sufficiently responsive to complaints. So we would like a faster response time to those complaints. I don't know if Ian would like to say anything more.
Well, I agree with all of what Andrew just stated there. I would question as to whether they are following appropriate measures due to the uptick in the infill rate of this particular landfill. I, with 20 years experience of landfills behind me, would very much question that. I don't think they are. And dust on the road is a significant issue. And as there's no safe level for PM 2.5s, they should take every step to reduce and mitigate dust in and around the area, because there is an active bike route that goes past there, and people do choke as they go past on occasion. Also, the futility of reporting odour events to the EA has been clearly stated to us in the liaison committee meetings. That the EA say it doesn't matter how many or how often odour complaints get given to them, they simply make no measure and no adjustment to the way that they investigate because of the number and frequency. It's immaterial to them. It's been made very clear. Yeah, odour is significant beyond their boundaries, and I don't think they're following appropriate measures to mitigate this additional pollution. That's all I'd say.
Okay, well, thank you very much to both our speakers. And again, now we turn to whether there are questions for them from members of the committee. Again, if there are such questions, if people will please indicate to me. And again, I think silence probably means that we've already had the detailed written representation. Once again, I've been taking notes as we go along, so I think unless I now see any indication of questions, I'll thank our speakers and we'll move to our next representation this evening. I think if we can do that, that will be speakers for the Stop the Stink group. Mr. Meakin and Mr. Eagles are the names that I have before me. So if they could be introduced to the group and then begin their 10 minutes when they're ready.
Hello, Chair, and thank you for inviting us. Can you hear us clear? Because this is the first time we've done something like this.
I certainly can, yes.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Graham and myself represent Poolfields Resident Association, and we've joined a partnership with Nutton Resident Association because obviously their problems are our problems and very similar. So it's good to talk to each other. The reason we started what we're doing, especially with the Stop the Stink campaign, we started that in, I think it was mid-17. Yeah, mid-2017, because the smell, the odour was getting awful. Now, if I move on from that to this year, it's unprecedented times. We've been in lockdown. Now we have had thousands, I'm not exaggerating on this, thousands of people comment to us out of the 2,500 people that signed the petition against it, saying that, yes, we're in lockdown, but we can't open the windows and we can't sit in our gardens properly and enjoy. I'm not saying all the time, because if Nutton are getting it, often Poolfields don't. If Silverdale are getting it, Nutton don't. It depends, I suppose, which way the wind's blowing. Now, I understand that the PHE have said that there is very little danger to people's health, but the quality of life that people are suffering because of this awful smell. And I agree with what Angela says about the building of new houses close to the site, but we've got to consider the houses that are already here. The people of Poolfields, they're suffering terrible with the smell, as are Nutton people. I'm going to speak in a second over the traffic issues, which are horrendous. I've got some video evidence where I was the passenger with a vehicle videoing, by the way. I wasn't using the camera while driving. I went down Cemetery Road, and the mud on the road was absolutely disgraceful. It wasn't one day's use. It was terrible. If it had been a wet day, as it was a dry day, but if it had been a wet day and that mud would have been any wetter, a motorbike could have come off, or somebody could have skidded into the back of somebody, or come off the road and onto a pavement and hit a pedestrian. So to me, it isn't being managed properly when the vehicles are coming off. They're not being washed properly. That was evident at the time. Graham's going to go on to the parking now, if I can pass you to Graham.
Right, good evening, everybody. The parking issues, as Steve's just explained, we get through the Stop the Stink campaign, we get lots of people private messaging, they go on the Facebook group, and we literally get bombarded with all sorts of issues, as though we can do anything about it. We can report it to the relevant people, but like it has been said tonight, I don't think the Environment Agency really is stepping up to the mark, perhaps as good as they should be, with all sorts of issues, really, because when more and more vehicles were entering the site, we saw a big change in vehicle movement. We pass there daily, and we know people who pass every day. And the vehicle movements, the chaos they caused at night time, illegally parking. There's been vehicles, unregistered vehicles, there's vehicles going in there which are untaxed and things like that. Well, that's being passed on to the relevant people, that's being passed on to the police. But that's the kind of thing we've had to do, because, you know, we've sort of passed things on to the police and things like this, because there's so many issues, but one very big issue, and it's a very personal issue. It was a funeral some time ago now. It was a funeral at Silverdale Cemetery, and the lay-by, which is there for the cemetery, outside the cemetery, that is the lay-by is the purpose to the cemetery. It was the day on the funeral, which was a relative's funeral of mine. The lay-by was full of lorries, and they were even parked on the grass verge, which I know has been done since, has been dealt with since. But basically, it's a big family. We had lots of relatives there at the time, which in them times, you know, you could, there was allowed a lot of people allowed at funerals, unlike today. But a lot of the cars, they couldn't park. People were walking from way up the road in St. Mary's or Mary's Way, and they had to walk through mud. They were walking through mud and all sorts. They couldn't get nowhere near the cemetery. And again, I know it's not exactly, it's Red Industries. I know it's not Red Industries' problem about the vehicles on the road and the driver's attitude towards people, because there was comments passed by some relatives of mine as they couldn't get nowhere near to the funeral. The comments what were passed by some of the drivers. Now, I know that's not directly Red Industries, but they going on to that side. They have got involvement with that side, and really the parking that can be the parking. I know the lay-by has been done, but when they went to the funeral, they could not believe what they'd got to stand in and smell all the way through the service. And it was a really, I know that's irrelevant because it's close to a cemetery, which is not exactly the same as being close to a residential area. But again, it's a similar thing with where people are going to for that kind of thing, which is sad times. Everybody complained about the horrendous smell. They couldn't breathe in the cemetery, but like I say, it's ongoing. It's still ongoing with lots of issues.
Let me come in now. If I can just pass a comment, Angela mentioned that the speed that the Environment Agency return people's calls or respond to complaints, we find it absolutely shocking. We always, when we phone, ask for feedback. Now, I've phoned lots of times, other people have phoned lots of times and had it called, got a reference number and everything else. Now, people are telling us on the site they never receive feedback. Now, I can say that we don't receive feedback at all. They need to speed their response up when people are complaining, because people are taking the time to complain, and they're not complaining for nothing. They're complaining because they're uncomfortable. And as Angela said, we need to now, I think, and we think, and the group think, and hundreds of people think, it's now time to stop whatever they've been putting in there that is causing this awful smell and upsetting people's lives. It's now become a darn public nuisance. That's in our view. So I thank you for listening to us.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And again, now I just ask committee members whether they have any questions to ask of our presenters. Is that Councillor Reddish? Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I've just got a question really for Stop the Stink group. From your presentation, and thank you very much for it, is the main issue then the odour, or is it the highways? I know it's both, but what would you say was the number one problem? What are you looking for us to do as this working group? What would you, in your dream world, what would you like us to actually implement, or suggestions you would like to make?
Okay. The initial thing that why we started this was because of the strong odour. Yeah. Right. It's bad on frosty nights. It's bad on hot days. You can't have your windows open. And if you saw the BBC, because we did a interview for the BBC, I don't know whether you saw it. The chap who lives just up the road, he wouldn't even hang his washing out because of when he brought the clothes back in, it smelt.
Yeah.
Of the odour. So when we started it off, it was because of the odour. But since they've increased the tonnage, which we've got the email from the Environment Agency sent us an email stating that they've done this because it's within their remit and they can do it. Since they've increased that tonnage, the traffic has got terrible. It's absolutely shocking. I've got, again, another video footage of there was five articulated lorries parked up on Cemetery Road, waiting to go in the site, and we had to pass 5 of those vehicles over the brow of a hill. That's wrong. That is total bad management. They should have been time to go in or whatever, given time slots. I don't know how to work that. It's not my remit to be able to do that. But to have 5 articulated lorries parked up on the main road where people are trying to come down to go to work, and this was, mid-morning, so there was a lot of traffic about. That was awful. So yes, Marion, and I appreciate your question. It was initially about what we call the stink, yeah, but it's moved on now to the other issue of the traffic, and obviously you've got the visual side of it as well. Now people are having to look out of their living room windows to see a mound of rubbish and seagulls, and thousands of seagulls. I mean, the caravan site up the road there, I feel so sorry for those people. They're having to live with the seagulls, the rats, and everything else. And the bird scarer bangs are horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And when them seagulls come up, as you know, Marion, I live in Poolfields Avenue, the sky goes black with seagulls. Now, all those seagulls are dropping fishes. So I apologise for taking so much time to answer, but that's it. Yes, we went from the stink to...
That's absolutely fine, Steve. I just wanted to clarify my own house. As you know, I live in Thistlebury, so...
Yes, I know. Yeah.
I'm here to listen, not to speak tonight.
Okay, fine.
Any further questions? Just before, actually, and if I could say, Mr. Meakin, I mean, you make reference to videos and such like. Again, Obviously, if the committee has concrete evidence, it's better than evidence which could be classed as hearsay. So if you were prepared to share that material with the committee, that I think members would find helpful. Absolutely.
We have actually put them on Facebook and made them public to make people aware, so that, you know, people, because what we've thought about the accident issue, and Graham and myself discussed it and said, no, we need to put this out and make it public to make people aware. Hang on, this could actually happen to you, so please be aware when you're driving down to that site. So yes, I mean, if you give me details of who to send them to, we'll send them, no problem at all.
Okay, I'll put that in hand, and I shall be in touch.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from committee members? In that case, I'd like to thank our presenters for their contribution this evening, and we'll pass to our next contributor, who I think is Mr. Adam Chuck from the Western Communities Locality Action Partnership. So if again, he can be brought into the room and address us on the same terms.
Hello, can you see me?
I can't see you, but I can certainly hear you, Mr. Adam Chuck.
Should you be able to see me?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it actually matters. So,
okay. Okay. Well, I can see you, Chair.
Okay. I commiserate with you, but please do give your question.
No, I'm happy to look at the committee. It's really helpful to see people in the face when you're giving a submission. I've got 2 slots in this committee meeting. The first one is factual and descriptive, and that's in my role as chair of Western Communities Lab. And it will follow something a bit different, more analytic, more technical. So I'll have more to say in the second slot, in the first slot. And that was the more complex submission to put together. Anyway, I've been chair of the Western Communities Lab for over 2 years now. It covers Crossheath, Nutton and Silverdale. So it's a big population, at least 13,000 people live in there. Some of them are very, very close to the site, particularly those in Silverdale Road and those towards Silverdale Village, and those people in the streets around Nutton Lane that live in Nutton. So all those populations are very, very close, and I would say they're downwind of the landfill. And part of the reason for having a LAP committee is that we can draw together expertise from the councillors, interested parties, and cover quite a big area. So I thought it was important that we have an opportunity to put our view forward. So I'm just going to say how we dealt with the issue in our committee, and then I'll talk about the general issues that come up, which we've heard quite a lot about. We last discussed this last October, and the LAP committee decided that it would oppose the increase in tonnage. That's the increase from 250,000 to 400,000 tonnes. And that was on a number of grounds. Principally, it was the pollution from waste dust, actually, with HGV. So we're very worried about the amount of dust particles, and that those vehicles go past major school runs, past care homes, all sorts of places with very important social needs. And it's about the pollution from vehicles en route to the landfill site, as well as within the landfill site, delivering their tons of waste. So we do recognise that the smell's bad, but we also are worried about dust, particularly dust called the particulate matter 10, which is relatively small particles of dust, and you get that within the landfill, and you get that from vehicle emissions en route to the landfill. So that's our issue that we want to raise. It's the vehicles en route to the landfill, as well as delivering their waste product onto the landfill. We concur with some of the previous comments that there's issues about how the drivers use the roads, Cemetery Road, Keel Road and Silverdale Road, and how they can churn up some of the pathways when they're turning and when they're parking. So we've had all those issues. Also, we have issues where vehicle dust or dust from the vehicles drops onto the road and causes rubbish on the road, and we've reported that as well. And we've said that the contractors need to comply with health and safety regulations. So that's the general point that was made in our committee meeting. In advance of this particular session, one of our members wrote a little bit more detail about her experiences. She lives in Silverdale Road, and she has a garden that faces the landfill site. And she said that the main issues were odour, dust, debris from vehicles, seagulls, and the visual experience of the locality. And she did say there was issues about how the weather affects the amount of dust and matter that comes off the site. She also says that, particularly in lockdown, it's been very negative for mental health, where you can't go into your garden, you're stuck in your house all day, you can't get out because of the odour. That person also supports what Stop the Stink said, that she's reported it over and over again, no feedback. And one of the points I'll make later is how the reporting system needs to be improved, so we do get feedback, we do find out more than just numbers. And she also said that Red Industries have a record of social responsibility. So we recognise that Red Industries have a role to play. And in the next session, when I talk about Silverdale, I'll explain how I think that the role of Red Industries could be improved in many ways, so they do have a better relationship with the residents, and that can only come through changing the way it operates at the moment and looking at the Environment Agency. And the last point was that we agreed that we shouldn't increase the tonnage until a public health perspective has been put on at least the existing amount of tonnage, because all the data that we've had is for 250,000. As far as I'm aware, all that data was collected when the lower tonnage figure applied. And then in the next session, I'll talk about how that increase was communicated to participants, and that has created a lot of problems for residents and for people in groups like the parish council and in the lab. So if there's any questions that you want to raise on Western Communities Lab, I'm happy to deal with them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adamchuk. So yes, as our speakers alluded, he's in fact speaking for two groups this evening. So are there any questions for him on what he's outlined already as regards the Western Communities Lab? And again, I think, Mr. Adamchuk, that the silence implies that that's not the case. So could I invite you to give your second presentation, please, as regards Silverdale Parish Council?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Part two. So I'm now wearing the hat of Silverdale Parish Council. Before I start, I'd like to say abbreviations that I'm going to use. WHO, World Health Organization. AQS is the air quality standard. That's the DEFRA standard for the tiny particulate matter that we're very concerned about. I'm going to talk about PM10, which are particles less than 10 microns in size. That's a very small amount, 10 to the minus 6 meters. That's a millionth of a meter. And also μg, that's micrograms, that's a millionth of a gram. So we're talking about very, very small microparticles that we know from DEFRA, there is no bottom limit that is healthy for those particles, not just the PM 2.5, but also the PM10. Anyway, so I'll come to those issues. I'm representing now Silverdale Parish, which covers Silverdale Village, it covers Parkside, it covers the new estate, Heritage Park, it covers a swathe of houses on Silverdale Road. So it's quite a stretching parish council. That's 5,000 residents, occupying 2,700 households and over 100 businesses. And obviously, we haven't got that business involvement in this, but maybe in the future it's something that we should take on board. I'm going to make 5 main points. I'm saying that the increase from 250,000 tonnes to 400,000 tonnes involved decision-making on a temporary basis by the Environment Agency and the landfill site company, which was badly communicated. Second point is that I think Red Industries Liaison Committee could be souped up, could be boosted for a much more public health orientated role. If that can be achieved, that's a way forward as I see it. There's an argument that Red Industries weren't particularly good at public relations when it really mattered, when they had to get this big change clearly to a lot of people. They blew it, literally. They made a bad job of a very difficult decision to very large numbers of people. I was very unhappy about that decision, for example. Then there's issues about the Environment Agency. Are they complacent in the way they've specified which WHO standards and which AQS standards apply? Have they given the company the benefit of doubts? I've asked questions about that and I've not got a good answer about it. And then finally, when we made the observations and comments on the variation or application last year, we learned that the Environment Agency were only interested really in what was happening on the site. So really you had to understand the management of the waste process and be able to understand that complexity, all the different chemicals and all the biochemical reactions taking place and decide whether it was the right thing to do, very technical issues. But en route, when that HGV lorry carrying tens of tons going down Silverdale Road, coming across Cemetery Road, that didn't count. That pollution does not count. It's only what happens within the boundary of the site. So I raised that issue and I've not had a good response. It concerns me that only half an equation is being looked at. And that's why I think it's really important, not just to talk about the smell. Smell's important. We want to keep the smell out of people's gardens, but we also want to keep the dangerous particulates out of the street, out of the road, away from those schools, in order that we know for sure that there's a safe process going on in that site. So I've got a number of recommendations. If I can just run through them very, very quickly. I want to suggest that the liaison committee is recommenced. It's not had any meetings since February. There's no way of communicating with that group at all, which is really bad. So I think that should be re-energized. I think it should have a big hitter as chair. If the council leader wants to continue, I think that's great. I supported him as chair when he became chair of that committee. There might be an argument for extending the membership, so the businesses, some other people might be involved, so we get a wider range of people, because there has been a problem with people not turning up. So we don't get a nice range of interests in that committee. Going on to public relations generally, the Red Industries company did not engage with the Nutton residents last year when there were some massive public meetings. 100 people turned up. That's a big public meeting. And the following, meeting, there were 100 people turning up. And it was wonderful to see so many people having a view and putting it forward. There was no participation by Red Industries. And I think that was a mistake. Had they appeared and taken some of that heat, it would have made a lot of difference. So I think they should dip their water into some of these important public forums and, show to the public that they are willing to listen and they take the issue seriously, and they can take those issues away and come back and explain to them what is being done. Also, by doing searches, I found out that there's lots of technological initiatives that could be used that have never been mentioned. For instance, there's an Italian bit of tech by Renato Del Rosso from 2014 that you can have an electronic nose on site, and you can have several points of sensor all across the site, and that would tell you how much of the various pollution elements were present, not just one point, but lots of different points. So if it's the middle of the night when there's no one on site, or if it's a bank holiday, there'd be a sensor there. We should be invested in that. We should ask the company to find out about it. So I think there should be a role for public health and a more scientifically orientated person who could give them better advice of where they should go, and maybe search some of these technologies that would help the company as well as help the residents.
2-minute warning.
Yeah, and then just to say that the original application there was confusion over the size of the tonnage. On one of the pieces of documentation, it said they were going up to 300,000. On another, it said they were going up to 400,000. And also in the important meeting that we had in the liaison group, it said from 300 to 400,000. So we didn't know how much extra tonnage would be put on that site. So that was the beginning of things getting difficult for the company from a public relations point of view. So the rest of it is in my report. So if you want to ask me about that, I'm happy to explain it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Avanchuk, for a very detailed presentation. As you say, more detail as well in the written submission that Silverdale Parish Council have made. And again, I'll just ask now whether committee members wish to ask any further questions of you on those matters.
I've lost my screen now.
You're back, Councillor Reddish. If you wish to ask a question, please.
I'll raise my hand this way. Yeah, lots of good information there, very useful information. I'm just wondering if Henry would be willing to submit his report so that we can digest it at our leisure. I don't know what you think, Chair.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
No, well, the committee is more than happy for representations to be made. So again, I think, if I may say, Mr. Adamchuk, if you were to send us either via email in the same way that you've done in the past, or simply send it in a written form to the Task and Finish Group, the Wallace Quarry Task and Finish Group, care of Castle House, it will reach the right places.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions, or shall I proceed to our next speaker? I hear no questions. So again, I'd like to thank Mr. Adamchuk for making 2 presentations to us this evening. And I'll now move to our next speaker, Mrs. Sarah Oliver, who is going to speak from Spire housing perspective from the Cemetery Road sites.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and evening everybody. Yes, like I said, I'm here representing the Travellers site, which is situated off Cemetery Road. I've only recently joined Aspire Housing, so I do apologise because the information that I've got regarding the site is quite limited, and I have found being involved in this session very informative because I wasn't aware of the plans for the waste disposal site. So from the Travellers' point of view, we recently did a consultation on that site, and it wasn't to do with the waste disposal site. It was about how they found living on the site in general. But one of the things they did mention was the presence of rats, which has increased recently. And the rats obviously are coming from the waste disposal site, and that is having an impact on their quality of life. And they've mentioned being fearful of coming out at night because you can hear them running around the site. So that was one of the concerns. And then also the increase in birds, which has also been mentioned. But other than that, they didn't actually mention any other issues. But in all honesty, I didn't ask them the direct questions, which if I was aware that this meeting was planned to take place, I would have explored that with them in more detail. So my representation tonight is very short and sweet, and apologies for that.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Ms. Oliver. And again, I would say that, you know, that this is an ongoing process, this Task and Finish group. So were you to feel it was the right thing to do to go back and ask some of these questions, it would certainly be the case that were you to submit the answers to those questions to the committee, we will be happy to take those on board as we go along. And again, at this point, I just ask if there are any further questions committee members would wish to ask of the presenter. And I think the answer is no, but thank you very much for coming along. And as I say, if you feel that it will be appropriate to make further representations in writing at some juncture, please do feel free to do so. That then, I think, brings us to our final representations this evening, which are from our local MP, Aaron Bell. So again, I invite Mr. Bell to address the committee on the same terms as our other speakers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fear. Sorry, it just restarted on me there. Could I first of all thank you, all the other councillors this evening, all the officers and everyone who's contributed today. I think it's a very helpful exercise. It's a shame we haven't been able to have it sooner, but obviously that's been partly because of coronavirus. And, you know, can I also say how much I sympathise with obviously everyone who's here representing people today, but the community in general. I mean, I think having to live with this, and, you know, I think it was either Mr. Meakin or Mr. Eagles who put this very well, was that it's really, it's not just about the public health perspective about physical health, it's the quality of life and the impact that it has on people's mental health, living with the smell. And that's a point I made in Parliament, which I'll come to shortly. I mean, the quarry itself was a major topic of conversation during my election campaign, especially obviously when I was out canvassing in the affected areas, Thistlebury, Poolfields, Silverdale itself, and so on, and Nutton. And you know, it was obviously some people were not bothered at all, and some people were exceptionally bothered. And that's because I think smell and odour is very individual, and what some people can detect, other people can't. But I did make it a priority that I would try and take some action on this as soon as I could, because it was obviously such a big thing that was affecting so many people's quality of life in this part of Newcastle. So I made it a priority to get early meetings with local campaigners, such as the people on this evening, with the Environment Agency, and indeed with Red Industries, who I spoke to early on. Just to go over those meetings, I think the local campaigners have obviously set themselves out this evening, and that they've made the same points to me then as they have now. The Environment Agency, my view is that the report that they gave didn't really seem to reflect the reality of the situation in the eyes of many constituents. I also found it disappointing in their report. They didn't even go as far as to say that the smell was definitely coming from the landfill, even though they had various monitoring stations, and the maps that they themselves published made it pretty clear that it was. I don't know whether they were legally advised not to do so, but I found that disappointing. And they did acknowledge that the directional analysis showed there was a continuous source of methane and hydrogen sulfide from the direction of landfill, WALLEY'S Quarry landfill site. And a build-up of these compounds was seen under certain conditions, low wind speed and temperature, high pressure. To talk to my meeting with Red, Red, obviously they do a number of good things for the community in terms of their charity work and the things they sponsor in the area. But I must say, I do find it disappointing that they continually refrain to say that we are compliant. And I think that it seems to be something that's obviously they're doing under legal advice, because they don't want to admit that the site smells. They wouldn't admit to me that the site smells. And, when you're representing thousands of people who are all telling you the site smells, I find that a very difficult, almost incredible position to be in, that they won't directly admit that the site smells, despite all the complaints about it, the reason why we're convening this and so on. And I think that, is sort of the PR point that Mr. Adamchuk made about their need to engage with people. And if they're not prepared to engage on the basic facts that the site smells, I think people are going to have a lack of trust in anything that they do, even whilst they are legally compliant with what they're supposed to be doing. So what I did after that was I arranged for a debate in Westminster, which the committee may be aware of already. It's in Hansard, 25th of February, in which I secured a debate, which I mentioned a number of constituents' concerns, and I made a number of asks of the Waste Minister, Rebecca Powell. I think the Environment Agency is fundamentally a little bit toothless. There are certainly complaints that I've heard this evening about a lack of response times, which could be improved anyway. But fundamentally, they don't have the powers to react quickly. I don't believe to issues as they arise. And I think in the long run, we'd like to see the DEFRA department give the Environment Agency a much broader range of powers to allow it to deal more quickly and frequently with events. I've got a similar case up in the Betley area, Doddlespool Farm, where again, the Environment Agency, in my view, are struggling to react as quickly as I'd like. The other thing, I mean, in terms of longer term ideas, I think the law should be changed, because I don't think we should be aspiring to the bare minimum standards of the World Health Organization about this risk to human health. I think odour itself is a reason that we should make that should be much more tightly regulated than it is. We've heard about where you build houses and whether you can have landfills near housing. I don't believe it should ever have been granted in the first place, but then we're going back nearly 20 years if we get into that debate. So, if it's legally permissible, but it smells as much as it does, and I'm aware of how bad it's been during lockdown, and the points that people made about that are particularly well made, because it's hard enough when you're locked in your house, when you can't open the windows. And it was incredibly hot, if people remember, in April as well. If you can't open your windows because of the smell, and you're not allowed to leave your house, basically, it wasn't much fun for anybody. And I should say, I had hundreds of emails on this over the period. I had an awful lot when I asked for them around the debate I had in February, but continued through the lockdown. And in recent months, I've been saying, well, this scrutiny panel is coming, and hopefully we might be able to get some actions out of that. I think the Environment Agency, we've heard about the lack of trust between RED and the communities. I think the Environment Agency, again, that applies to them. It took nearly 6 months for the finding of that monitoring exercise to be made public, and I think that contributed to a sense of suspicion amongst people. And I think that what I do think is that changing the law, which I think is what's needed in the long term, is regrettably not going to be the solution for WALLEY'S Quarry. And I think most campaigners here would recognise that you're not going to get a change in the law in time to materially affect WALLEY'S Quarry in the time that it's got left. And in any case, any change in the law, trying to make that retrospective to things that had already been awarded would be, judicially very unwise, because I think you'd end up being caught up in loads of court cases and so on. So although I will push for changes in the law, I don't believe that that's necessarily going to be the best way to try and deal with this now. I think indeed what you're doing here with the scrutiny panel is the best way forward. But what I did ask the Minister as well, and maybe it's something the panel can consider, is something along the lines of what Mr. Adamchuk said about monitoring data and taking a more scientific approach. If we had some constant monitoring sites, in roughly the same areas perhaps as the Environment Agency had during their exercise, and we made those data available on a live website, for example, so people could see what was going on, because I don't think people have any faith in the reporting system. I've tried to share it, Red have tried to share it with us, but people don't feel they're getting anywhere with that. Whereas if we had a reporting website where people could see it was being constantly monitored, when it went into a danger level or red, amber, green, however they wanted to do it, if people could actually directly see that these things were being measured in a scientific way on an ongoing basis, I think that small change would help people feel less anxious and understand that things are being looked at and listened to. And if things get worse, then there's going to be something that automatically picks that up rather than us having to go through these processes. So, I'm aware that it's a very difficult problem to solve. In terms of the tonnage, I've heard both sides of the argument, and I think it's really probably something for this panel to consider, actually, because I do have some sympathy with what Dr. Drakakis-Smith said about supporting the acceleration on the basis we'll get it filled more quickly. But I've also heard all the arguments about the traffic, which I completely sympathise with as well. My concern about supporting the acceleration would be that it might lead to a creep position where it doesn't get filled any quicker, it just gets filled fuller or whatever. The concern about keeping it get back to 250 is they might think there's grounds to appeal that. It might be that if the council has to contest that, there could be costs for the council, and going forward they might say, well, they can't close the site until they filled it to the level that they were expecting. So that's a difficult issue. The Environment Agency are going to open that consultation soon, and I look forward to seeing that consultation, perhaps contributing it to myself. But I mean, that's really, I think, all I can say on it. It's clearly a very, very big issue for the affected communities. It affects people in the centre of town as well. It affects businesses. On certain nights you can smell it as you come out of pubs and clubs. So that's not a good look for our town centre either. But obviously, most directly, it's the communities that live in the circling areas of the landfill. It's my hope that we can make some progress through this committee and try and ameliorate some of the issues. But I recognise that you've got a very difficult job, Councillor Fear, with this committee, and I wish you all the best with it.
I'd like to thank the MP for coming along and speaking to us on this issue this evening. And again, I'll go through the same question now to my fellow committee members. Are there any questions for the MP, having heard what he's just said? Councillor Heason.
Hi, it's not particularly a question just for Aaron. It's for everybody, really. And I hope I'm not treading on your toes, Chair. I'd just like to say it is an issue that's impacting on our local communities, and I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time to attend this meeting and to raise those concerns and, some of the other things that are probably going to be new to us when we receive the reports and video to the committee to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heason. Yeah, I agree completely, and I glad this is being done in a cross-party way, because as Councillor Fear said at the start, it's not a party political issue about this. This is about communities having their lives blighted, as far as I'm concerned, and anything we can do through this process to improve things, to get some more responsiveness from the operator and the Environment Agency would be great.
Councillor Rout, I think you wish to make a contribution.
Yes, I really just wanted to echo what Councillor Heason said, that one of the ways that we can move this forward is hearing from different groups within the community. And I've definitely learned some things today that I hadn't been aware of before, and that we'll be able to hopefully take forward as a task and finish group. So I wanted to say a really big thank you to everyone who's contributed today.
Thank you, Councillor Rout.
As I hear silence, perhaps now is the time to.
I think Councillor Reddish wants.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Reddish. I didn't see you there.
No, my technology is great. I have to say my heart sank a bit, Aaron, when you said that you didn't think that way forward was by better legislation or improving the legislation, although I understand the rationale behind it. Certainly everything that I've listened to tonight rings bells in every direction. I've been very disciplined not to actually express an opinion, and I'm still not going to express an opinion. But I do think that the residents across the borough, actually, not just in Luton and Silverdale and Thistlebury and wherever, are very concerned about the health issues. Now, we're hearing from the World Health Organization and the health experts that we don't need to fear that. But how do we get that out? How do we, as a group, then get that message out firm that it's unpleasant what's going on, but it's not actually affecting our health? How would you suggest we did that, Aaron?
Thank you, Councillor Reddish. Just to speak to what you said first about the change in the law. I mean, I will still keep pushing this at Westminster. I think the law should change, and my concern is that given the timescales we have here, and also the point I made about it would be seen as retrospective if the law was changed to affect existing landfills. I just think if people think that's the route that's going to solve the problem, I think, I don't want to get people's hopes up. I mean, I can try bringing forward a private member's bill if I get lucky in the ballot and so on, but the chances of anything like that getting onto the statute book are quite slim. About the public health point, well, we do have to, as with the coronavirus, be guided by the science, and the science says that these levels of particulates, and in particular the hydrogen sulfide, which is the thing that bothers people, makes people retch, which is things that people said to me. The science is that is not physically harmful to human health. It's just very, very unpleasant to live with. Now, my view is, which I expressed in the debate, is that this is in itself potentially damaging to mental health, and the feeling of being cooped up, not being able to go out, not being able to do basic things like hang your washing on the line, things like that. These are real concerns that affect people's mental health as well. But I think the physical health point, I do think we should be guided by the science. Don't think we should, I don't think we should fearmonger and put out conspiracy theories about these sorts of things, even though I understand that people do have real concerns. And as I can't remember who it was earlier said, but I think I think it may have been the initial briefing, but going to the doctor is the right place to start if you have personal concerns about your health. And if the doctor believes it's influenced by this, then he can make a report of that for you, and you can take that to this panel or indeed to Red and say, well, the doctor is saying this. But the general point has to be based on Public Health England advice, because I'm not a scientist. I'm not better placed to give that advice, Councillor Reddish.
Have we got any further questions this evening before I do try to draw things to a close? Well, in that case, I mean, again, I'd like to re-echo my fellow committee members in thanking everyone for taking the time to come this evening and to present us with good presentations with lots of information for us to think about. And also, I think we should think about the comportment. Everyone, I think, has behaved in an exemplary fashion this evening, and I would like to thank them for that as well. Taking away from what we've heard, I mean, I think we have heard that there is a volume of concern here. The MP spoke of being bombarded. We heard of a 2,500 person petition. We heard of public meetings of 100 people and so forth. Also, I think, as well as what one would expect, questions about odour, there was quite a strong sense of other forms of pollution to do with dust, and indeed this connected with issues of highways management, which perhaps is something that the committee needs to think about as well. Beyond that, I think many of people who made representations this evening seem unhappy with the way the Environmental Agency has conducted itself, and we have a session, of course, where they will be in attendance, and probably we need to take on board that as well. There was also some disappointment with Red Industries and the way they communicated with the public, which which perhaps is something we can communicate to them and hopefully make better as time goes by. And finally, I think there was the issue of monitoring and how good that is, how effective it is. And again, perhaps we can give some thought to how that could be improved in the future. Those, I think, are the sort of main points as I've seen them this evening. Again, I'm sure that as we think upon these, we've heard, other stuff may emerge. We've got the written material as well to think about. So I'd like to thank everyone, particularly, of course, those who've given presentations, but also members of the committee for coming along this evening. And I look forward to our next meeting in due course when we'll be